classic TV fans, and welcome to the Season 2 premiere of the Retro TV Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Pat McCormack. I can't think of a better way to kick this season off than with my special guest, Mr. Butch Patrick. As one of the most admired and recognizable child actors, playing Eddie Munster was obviously his most popular role. But as you will hear, he did much more than that. He continues to thrill Munsters fans around the country as he's a regular at fan events, many of which accompanied by his cars. Which cars, you might ask? The Munster Coach and Dragula, of course. I hope you enjoy my interview with the Munsters' Butch Patrick. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podcast the iconic Butch Patrick. Butch, how are you?
Mr. Pat McCormack, how are you? You know, your name, there's a very famous comedian that also is named Pat McCormack. Great big guy.
Yes, notoriously linked to him for most of my life. And honestly, I'm not going to complain because the guy was a genius.
Yeah, he actually played Lurch in the Addams Family Funhouse that I did back in the early 70s as I played Pugsley.
Now, that would have been, I didn't see that, and I should have.
It was only a briefly one-shot deal. We had Jack Riley, and, Mr. Carlin from Newhart was Gomez, and Liz Torres was Morticia, and then Stubby K, believe it or not, was Uncle Fester.
Boy, talk about a perfect crossover. I mean, at least in your case, it was perfect. I'm trying to picture Pat McCormack as Lurch and thinking, how could he have kept his mouth shut that long?
Our special guest star singing his way through the front door was Jim Neighbors.
Perfect. Well, yes. Of course, you're most well known as Eddie Munster from that show, which was one of my favorites. And so I'm thrilled to be talking to you, my friend.
No problem.
But, of course, your classic TV career, which some folks may not realize, started well before that. You appeared on a lot of series. Yeah,
I kind of stumbled into the business when I was 7 years old. Mary Grady was my one and only agent, and she had opened up the world's first child actors agency exclusively, and I was one of her first paying clients back in 1960. And I started off with a little movie called The Two Little Bears, which worked with Eddie Albert and Jane Wyatt and Soupy Sales. Very good little. Brenda Lee was 15-year-old singing sensation, was my older sister. And while I was filming that, I picked up a Kellogg's Cornflakes commercial. And then right after we completed that, I then did General Hospital, the first episodes that were ever on the air.
Wow.
And then that led on to a lot of guest starring roles in various movie parts, which led up to The Real McCoys, which I did a year of The Real McCoys with the great, Walter Brennan and Richard Crenna. And then after that, I went back east and the Munsters got cast and they flew me back out for a screen test with Yvonne DiCarlo, which changed my life.
Yeah. Well, again, you came in, though, almost a veteran. I mean, I'm looking here. You were on My Three Sons, My Favorite Martian, Bonanza, Mr. Ed, Rawhide. I mean, and the list goes on, folks.
Yeah, I did a lot of Westerns. I could ride a horse. My uncle supplied horses to the studios, and that was really the closest affiliation that I had because people always ask, how did you get into the business? And, I really did stumble into it. It was an accidental situation. But Uncle John did supply horses and had a ranch out in Newhall. He's actually married to Georgia, and her maiden name was Spawn. And if anybody knows Hollywood, you know all about the Spawn Ranch.
Right. Well, it's pretty amazing because it seemed like it was just serendipitous that you were going to make it in the business, even with those connections. But of course, you got to ride a horse.
Yeah, well, and I actually really enjoyed Westerns too because they were usually, a lot of times they're outdoors and, you wear Levi's and be dirty and, it wasn't like a prim and proper scenario in the Hollywood soundstage. So that was fun. But it was always a temporary job for me. I enjoyed it. It was I was good at it. I had a knack for it, but it wasn't a calling by any means. It was more of a temporary set of jobs that were going to hopefully pay for my race car career.
Yes. This is a jack of all trades here, folks, for sure.
Yep.
Well, and again, these different genres, Westerns, and of course, sitcoms. even the Untouchables, which you would call, drama. Of those three, and of course there are more. Really, what was your favorite, Butch?
Of the series or just guest stars?
Of the genres. So in other words, dramatic, comedic.
Comedy. I always enjoyed comedies, especially a comedy where you got to play sort of a snotty or bratty kid in a comedy setting. That was always fun. Like when I did I Dream of Jeannie, where I was Dr. Bells's nephew, who Tony was supposed to fix from being a mean kid, and that was a very fun episode. The Monkees Christmas episode, where I played a little rich kid. I wasn't really mean, but I was, very much the antagonist to their protagonist, and explaining to me the meaning of Christmas. So that was always fun. Whenever you got to play kind of a bratty kid with issues that turns around to be a really nice kid at heart.
Do you think they made you more bratty by naming you Melvin for that episode?
Melvin Vandersnoot. That was like the highlight of my career up to that point when I was a 14-year-old kid spending a week with the Monkees. You really had to go back. And if you really weren't alive and following the Monkees at that particular time in life, they were like the Beatles. I mean, they were like big, really big, except the Beatles never had a TV show. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. That here's this kid, me, 8th grade kid, landing the part of a lifetime to me at the time, because I not only got to hang out with them, I was sort of an equal in the show, to where we were in a lot of scenes together, and I was a very integral part of the storyline. Where a lot of times kids at that point would be a simple background, or you really wouldn't be in the meat of all the scenes, and that wasn't the case with the Christmas episode. I was very, very excited.
So it goes without saying that you were more of a fan of the Monkees than the Shandells.
Yeah, no, the Shandells were, they were cool. They kind of looked like the Beatles. They had the Beatle suit type of thing going on, and the Beatle boots, and they're sort of an offshoot. This was before, obviously, the Monkees. So, yeah, I was really happy with the Shandells, too. That was very cool.
Yeah, I said Shandells. I meant Standells. But, yeah, and of course, they're singing a Beatles song on the Munsters, which...
Yeah, the second one was Do the Ringo. So they had I want to hold your hand and do the Ringo. So they were like referencing all the Beatles stuff they could. They were like going to the well.
Yeah, I wonder. It was like, well, we write songs too. Well, sorry, you're not trending. I don't know. That's pretty interesting. But yeah, I'm a huge Monkees fan. And so I get how you must have felt, because, sure, they were a comedy. They were actors, but they were also a hit machine. It was just one after another.
No, I'm good friends with. Obviously, I knew them all, but there's a woman named Jody Ritson who does the Monkey Mania Radio, and she's a big fan of the Monkees. Works a lot with Mickey and Mike and all this kind of stuff, and I've been following her, and she really is very adamant about trying to get them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and stuff. And when you say hit machine, they really were. They didn't get a fair shake as far as the real talent that they had. They were not just a manufactured situation. They actually were very good at what they did.
Hey, Mike Nesmith could write. Let's face it. He really could. And I mean, a lot of people don't realize just how much he did do just outside of the Monkees. I mean,
well, not only that, but if you really do the research with Mickey and Peter and stuff, and Davey in his own right over in England, coming back and forth. Davey was more of a entertainer, Broadway kind of guy, sing and dance man, but Peter in the late 60s, he's living in Laurel Canyon. Mickey's house is the go-to house for all the party stuff. Peter Tork's loaning money to Stephen Stills to buy a boat. I mean, they were integral in the fabric of the music of the Laurel Canyon sound in the late 60s. They were right there at ground zero. They were in the center of the storm. So they were really active. And Peter was very talented as well. And Mickey.
Right. Well, they all were. And what timing, Seriously.
Nemesis was just Don Kirshner. That was just a big ego clash.
Right. Yeah. Could have done it without him. Maybe not, but.
No, they were all. It was all part of the fabric. But my biggest problem was just the why they're not in the Hall of Fame is political to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, don't even get me started on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Jeez.
I know.
Jeez, we can't go there.
I look at the list of bands that I grew up with, that I went to their concert, that aren't in the hall. It's like, are you kidding me? Yeah. Are you kidding me? How can these people not be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And yet, there's a lot of there's a lot of acts in there that have nothing to do with rock and roll that are in there. So we'll leave it at that.
Well, there are two good reasons why Dolly Parton is, and I can't put my finger on them. Oh, that's bad. I had to borrow that one from Ruta Lee as she was talking about Frank Sinatra with me. I just couldn't put my finger on it.
Ruta Lee played my mom in Marcus Welby's pilot.
Oh.
Yeah, I pilot for Marcus Welby when I was the summer of '69, right when they landed on the moon. We were doing a thing called All Flags Flying, and Henry Wilcoxon, a famous actor from the '40s, all the old Gladiator movies and the Christy movies and the what's the movie the genre I'm thinking of, the Crusade movies, played my grandfather, and she played my mom.
And were you enamored? I mean, God, what a beauty.
Oh yeah, and the coolest thing about that whole week was when they were landing on the moon. Robert Young let us all take off for like 3 hours because he had placed TVs around the soundstage. Now they didn't walk on the moon until like at night, but they landed on the moon in the afternoon. So we got to watch all that. That was cool.
Yep, I remember it, which dates me. But then again, that's why I love all the classic nostalgic stuff. Not only because it was the best, but because it's my era too. So now that we're at this point, I want to thank our mutual friend for hooking us up, Miss Kathy Garver.
Hey, I did a family affair.
I was just going to say, who I adore, by the way, and I saw that you did an episode of Family Affair in '68. Now, was that when you guys first met?
Yeah, they got 68 in there, but I'm pretty sure it was 67, but it's close enough. But yes, that's when we first met. I didn't really get a chance to meet her much at that particular shoot because the structure of the storyline was us and I'm pretty sure Johnny Whitaker's character was Jody, right. And I think it was Anissa. So Jody, and he wanted to be in a street gang that we gave him a task to do. So I didn't really see a lot of her, but that's where we first met, yes.
Yeah. Oh, such a sweetheart. And so thank you, Kathy, by the way. Last time I saw you, you were actually at an event with Mr. Whitaker. It was an event that you actually helped put together with our friend Mr. Zemrak, the Krofft Con.
Yeah, that was, I'm very proud of that. That was something that I had been wanting to do for a long time. And sometimes good things, come to those who wait. Derek is a wonderful guy, and I love his theater. Yeah. So when we had done a screening of Munster Go Home there, he says, "What else you got up your sleeve?" I says, "I got to tell you, 30 years ago, I tried to put a Krofft Con together that got close but didn't quite get over the hump. And I would love to do it again, and I think your theater would be a perfect host spot." And he agreed with me, and he took the idea and ran with it. And so we partnered up, and he did the hard part. I had the idea, granted, and I did Lidsville, and I knew a lot of the Krofft people, but he actually made it happen. So it was a great turnout. I couldn't have been more excited. It's gotten a lot of notoriety, and it was well reviewed, and people really thought a lot of it. So we're hoping to maybe do it again and possibly take it on the road someday.
Absolutely. Well, I'm friends with Derek, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this Krofft Con thing," and I go, "Where?" And he went, "Well, here." And I went, "Oh, Derek, I don't think it's big enough." I mean, then again, it turned out perfect.
It was very, very well done. Perfect size. I was really happy. The one thing that I added to it that I was proud of was I got Caroline Ellis, because we needed to include somebody from the Bugaloos, and she's such a nice person. So we got her to do a little bit of a Zoom type of quick Q&A from Spain, which was wonderful. And she actually was one of the reasons I actually wound up doing Lidsville.
Let's hear that story.
Well, Marty contacts me, and I go out and I see the Krofft thing. And, this is the summer of '71, and I got really long hair, and I'm not really interested in doing a kids series. I'm just kind of frustrated with the whole Hollywood business, and I'm pretty much on my way out the door anyway, because I had told myself when I turned 18, I probably would quit the business to begin with. So this was already in my forefront. But Marty keeps reaching out, and finally I go out to the studio the third time, and I'm looking around, and I see this big picture of these Bugaloos and Caroline's picture. And I go, "Oh my goodness." I go, "Look at her." And I go, "So let me ask you a question. If I do this show, is there any chance that she might be a liar?" And he goes, "Yeah." Well, I agreed to it. She never did. She wasn't even in the country.
Oh, when she came up on the big screen that day at the event, I was just shocked with how beautiful she still looks.
Yeah, so that was funny. That was how it worked out between Sid telling me, give me a ride, and me seeing Caroline as I think she was Joy. I think was her character's name. So anyway, never happened, but we're friends via Facebook and social media. So that's nice.
Yeah, that's great. That we can stay connected that way, and amazing that we were actually able to talk to her live. I mean, I think it was like 1 a.m. there or something. It was
Yeah. And another good thing was that getting Sid and Marty together. They hadn't been in the same room for a long time. And Derek oversaw that. We brought in Sid, and I know Sid well, and I met Marty many, many, many times, but I knew Sid a little bit better. And it was nice that they all, as the thing picked up steam and it became, the response was all positive.
Yes, it was such a fun event. I mean, I love Kathy and Wesley, of course. They were there, and I took the raft. They threw me in the raft. Maybe go over the falls. It
was really well designed. It was the right Sharon Baird, who was a very instrumental part of all the Krofft shows. Her being there was a real treat. She was one of her and Billy Hayes basically made Lidsville a doable situation for me. I mean, it was like I signed on for 11 weeks. First week, I thought, what the heck have I got myself into? And it was Sharon and Billy that basically kept me going. Charles was fine. He was in his own world doing his own thing. But Raunchy Rabbit and Winnie Jeannie were my go-to pals. And I also knew a lot of the other little people. Felix Silla, Jerry Marin were both in there as well, and I knew them well. So that's kind of what made Lidsville for me a fun summer.
Well, yeah, I can only imagine. But again, the talent is immense, and they knew how to find it. They knew how to bring it in. And it was amazing that both brothers made it to this event. I mean, I was like, wow, there's Marty sitting right next to me. I can't believe it.
It's only been like 7 months ago, too.
Right.
I'm looking forward to doing it again. So me and Derek have got some plans to do. We're going to do I did a movie with Chuck Jones that I'm very proud of called The Phantom Toll Booth. And it's based on a book written by Norman Juster, who recently passed away. Had a chance to meet him a couple years ago. Really nice gentleman, and this was Chuck Jones' only feature film, and it was shot in the Bay Area as well. So we're hoping to do a thing for that because of the book factor, the Chuck Jones animation fan base, and then obviously the book and the Munsters and Chuck Jones. We're hoping would be a nice turnout for that. So that might be the next project that I'll be associated with Derek at the Orinda.
Well, can you promise me that you'll bring the cars for that?
The Munster cars? Well, you got to remember, I'm about 2,000 miles away.
No problem. You'll get here fast if you drive them. I mean,
taking those babies across country isn't quite as easy. But yes, I will make a concerted effort to do that.
I said to Derek, we could have parked him right here in the lobby. No problem. Oh, man. Yeah. So now I know you do events and travel around.
You bet.
Is that, again, we've had a pretty crummy last couple of years when it comes to doing personal events or personal appearances. And I'm sure that affected you. But hey, we're diving into a new season here, a new summer, and I'm assuming you're going to get back out there on the circuit, right?
Surprisingly enough, when I left in the end of 19, when I left Florida, because me and my ex it's part of the ways, and I basically she lived in Florida, so I had pretty much relocated there, for us. When I left at the end of 19, I took my trailer to Atlanta, I took my truck up to Raleigh to my filmmaker's house, and I flew to California to go visit my sister just for the holidays and hang out a little bit. And right when I got there, they locked down the country. The COVID thing happened, first week of March, I believe it was. So it was weird that I'm sitting out there and the country's it was really weird. It was like eerie. No planes, no traffic. It was like living in a Twilight Zone. It was very surreal. But about 6 months afterwards, I go, look, I've got to go get my stuff. I just can't drop a 34-foot trailer with my Munster Coach and my Dragula and just leave this stuff sitting forever. So when I went to get it, I found a car show in Wisconsin in June. Or June or July, I think it was, but it was still 2020. And what I did is at that point, I was basically going against the flow because everybody was locked down and everybody was, hiding and this and that, which was, I understand, I get it. But I had to go get my stuff, and I did. And I started doing car shows, outdoor events, and I did them in the Midwest. I stayed away from the, what would be considered blue cities and, places that had a lot of lockdown situations. And I kind of went with red states that were a little more liberal, and they had a few more job offers, outdoor car events. And I actually had a very interesting 2 years traveling, crisscrossing. I didn't fly a lot. When I did fly, the airports were like absolutely ghost towns. It was very weird. And you'd be like on a plane with 3 other people. But I got through it, and we got through it together, and that was the important part. But it was a very strange 2 years that basically turned out to be financially pretty lucrative, because maybe there so many people were shut down that when you went somewhere, people were so happy to get out, that they were just overjoyed to be coming back to normality, even though it might have been in its infancy. I made a pretty good go of it over the last two and a half years myself. I stayed fairly busy.
That's great. That's great.
I was lucky. I was very blessed. I know it, and I don't take it lightly. And I was very appreciative to those people who helped me out, and I helped them out. And like I say, with the cars and stuff, it's not like a personal appearance. It's more like an event. You come in and you help a promoter do like a concert situation. You're looking at big numbers.
Well, isn't that great? It's an example of how nostalgia can save the world. Well, maybe not that heavy, but
there's a lot to be said for, people talk about nostalgia in general and pop culture. And I worked from 1960 to 1974. And I got to tell you, that window, if you had to pick a window to be part of the entertainment and music industry, that's a really good 14, 15-year window to be part of. It's very strong. People still remember it. People still like it. People still attracted to it. Third generation kids are watching it with their parents and their grandparents. Munsters falls right into the middle of it. And you got, a little bit of Lidsville, a lot of the Munsters, a little bit of Phantom Tollbooth, a little bit of the Monkeys. I was very lucky to be part of a lot of stuff that's very positive. And they're actually teaching 60s in school to people because it was such a strong decade for so many different things other than entertainment, just historical significance.
It's true. And I mean, as I read autobiographies, like I'm just devouring them these days, folks such as yourself. And it really is. It's astonishing just what a great era it was. And, well, when the 60s hit, and I had older brothers and an older sister. And so I was exposed to all that which was going on at the time, maybe a little too much. But with that said, it was what got me into it. People ask, why are you into the retro? What is it that makes you love classic television so much? And it's very simple. It's because it was the best.
People ask me, they say, how come they can't make that stuff like they did back then? Why can't they do it today? And I go, well, we got to understand something. Is television, when it's first run, it's just a reflection of real time. So, writers in the early 60s are living in the early 60s, and they are writing about a different time that will never be duplicated. So it's not like you can do a period piece and you can sort of make it look like that, but to actually be physically part of it and have your mental putting pen to paper back then in real time, it's not the same. It's different back then, and that's why you'll never be able to duplicate it, because it's how your whole day, you would go about your day. That was a different world, and it's really difficult to actually duplicate that. It's easy to make it look the same, but it's hard to make it feel the same.
Sure. And I think, the classic shows, specifically the Munsters, the Addams Family, it was one of those things where, did they know what they had when they were doing it? For me, it's like, well, no, because they would have lasted more than 2 seasons. I mean,
it's like when I tell people I was lucky enough to do My Favorite Martian, Mr. Ed, I Dream of Jeannie, the Munsters. These were hit shows, the Beverly Hillbillies. I didn't do a Beverly Hillbillies, but there were a lot of shows back there that were very popular shows that had really no basis in reality. Right. They were just there for sheer entertainment factor, great talent, reading great lines from great writers about just funny stuff. A little bit later on, maybe Get Smart and Green Acres, but during the black and white period, the early Bewitches and the Genies, like I said, and Mr. Ed, who in the heck doesn't like Mr. Ed? A talking horse. it's so well done. It's so silly. It's so funny. Ed surfing, Ed sliding into second. It's like, oh my God, this is just so hilarious, but it made you laugh, and it had no merit whatsoever in reality because people were living reality. They didn't need it. They didn't need to come home and see it again. They wanted to laugh. TV was the portal. It was the entertainment box. The weekends were for movies and picnics and going out for rides, but the weeknights were for TV viewing.
Right. That's true. And it's like you say, the black and white era. The foresight there was great. But of course, hindsight, they're like, those are pretty darn good shows. Why did we cancel them?
To put it in perspective, the color hadn't really come into networking. We were on the cusp, 64, 65, and 66. 66 was the year of transition, where shows went from black and white to color. That was the timing was us. We were always a black and white show. There was never really talk about color until 66, and then they decided not to go with it because the ratings weren't there. So they made Munster go home the movie. But up to that time, we were lucky for us because it worked better in black and white. It would have never, in my opinion, we were in the right genre because what we were doing, we were making film-like sitcoms, texture. They were shot on film. They were done at Universal. Universal was the monster studio, and they knew how to make these sets look great. They knew how to do the shadowing and the lighting and the cobwebbing, and they knew how to make it really look scary, monstery, like the early Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman movies. So for us, that worked really well. And then you tied in the Leave It to Beaver producers with this very family-friendly point of view from a kid's, and they made Herman Munster like a very tall kid. And they wrote scripts that were funny and family-friendly from a kind of a kid's point of view, which the Beaver was, the first one. So it was a very interesting mushy together of the Universal Studios and the Monsters and the Westmore makeup and the Leave It to Beaver storylines into a very successful family-friendly monster show.
Right.
In black and white.
And again, for instance, the Munsters, they used colored makeup. If I'm not mistaken, it was purple for Herman. Is that right?
Well, he was. If you look at color pictures, he was more. We were all basically different shades of blue, white, and gray hue, but the highlights of the eyeballs and the eye sockets and the jawbone line, that was like on Lily, it was very green, and he was purple. Yeah, so there were lots of highlights, but the base structure of the face paint, but it was grease paint at first, and then it went to pan stick. But it was basically light colored with accents. Right.
And so how was that process for you? I mean, from what I've learned, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but that was part of the reason why Mr. Moomie didn't follow through with the part having to do with the makeup.
And that's another thing. How fate works out is like, if Bill had done the Munsters, then he wouldn't have been available for Lost in Space.
Which would have been tragic.
Well, it would have been, I like the way it worked out, but who knows? Maybe he might have been Eddie Munster and I may have been Will Robinson. You never know. The possibilities are endless with Switch. Back when Bill and I were both kid actors, we never saw each other on interviews because two things. Number one, we were different types. We didn't. When you put a breakdown out for a kid, the agent would never send us on the same thing because honestly, we don't. He's red-haired. I'm not. We just don't fit. So he and I really never knew each other very much until we were adults, and we're best friends now. I mean, he's a wonderful guy. Him and Eileen. I met him and Eileen both back in the early '80s. We were doing the Today Show together, and that's when we kind of connected and started hanging out.
Yeah, and there's a music connection too, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you both.
Well, I'm a Munster Manili.
I get it. You mean you couldn't do Fish Heads? Come on, one rendition.
I did, I wrote Whatever Happened to Eddie. I was involved with records, with Metro Media, but I was never a performing. And I told them up front, I was always honest about it. I said, I don't sing. They go, don't worry about it. We'll fix it in post. We'll get somebody to do it. I'm on American Bandstands, lip singing my little heart out. We tried to go on the road, but you can't go on the road when you don't really perform. It doesn't work. And for some reason, these guys thought that they could pull it off. And it was fun to be a rock star for about a year, and I recommend it to every 19-year-old kid to go out with Metro Media's gold card and an A&R man and let them fly you around the country in first class and meet hundreds and hundreds of women, and it it was like a really good time.
Yeah, what a nightmare. Oh boy. I had a little taste of it, when I was playing. I was in a band that was part of the General Hospital storyline, and we were a real band. And yeah, I've had a taste of it. I put 45 years of effort into it, so I got something out of it. But
well, and the fun part about it was we did that in 71, 72, and most people, we had Sugarloaf was my backup band, and they were the studio band, and this and that. We did a Bee Gees song, and what could go wrong? We got a Bee Gees song, we got Sugarloaf. Well, the problem is you don't sing. We got an issue with this, and it was like not my fault. So then 12 years later, MTV comes on the air, and I decide we want to do rock videos, but we don't have a track record. So what do? I write lyrics to Whatever Happened to Eddie, and Phil Cohn and myself produce a rock video called Whatever Happened to Eddie. And to this day, we were the first unsigned act ever to be on MTV, which is a big coup back in the day. Because when MTV came on the air, payola was very, very, very prevalent in the music industry. And it was all about pay to play. So to get ourselves on the air without a record deal was quite an amazing feat.
Well, and to tie in with that, just to bring it up to a little more modern times, when did you become aware that Rob was going to do Dragula?
I did not know that at all until I saw it.
It just happened. So he did. Zombie did freaking Dragula, which is one of his best, in my opinion.
He does really good videos, but it's definitely one of his best.
Yeah, and paying homage to the show, which, gee, I guess he must be a fan of. I was like, my voice is really messed up, Butch, as I was telling you last week, and I could always sing you a version of I Am John 5,
Yeah, I'll get you, John 5.
But I can hit that note.
And here's the ironic part of Dragula is he's doing Dragula driving the Munster coach.
Yeah, something wrong there.
Well, you couldn't fit anybody else in the Munster coach. I mean, either that or George Barris just sent him the wrong car.
Well, it sings good in the song. For so long, I didn't know what he was saying there, and then I'm like, wait a minute.
Along the lines of the Munsters and music and stuff, the Munsters it's certainly not yesterday, but it has been recorded by the London Philharmonic, the Boston Pops, Fall Out Boy did the riff, She Wants to Dance Like Uma Thurman, Rob Zombie. The Munsters theme, if you, like when I go and do personal appearances and stuff, or I'm doing anything of a music-related thing, and there's a band there, I don't think any band in the country does not know that guitar riff, because wherever I go, and people have it as a ringtone. It's amazing how strong the theme of the Munsters is in the music world. And then also, in addition to that, the 1313 Mockingbird Lane address is the most famous address ever utilized in television, because they emphasized it so much in the stories and the script setups.
You recently appeared in Rob's remake. Well,
yeah.
You appeared, but you didn't appear like I wanted you to appear.
Well, I was happy. Pat and I were both just happy to be acknowledged, by Rob, and he's a huge fan. And I, it was funny when I was in Connecticut, I took my Munster coach out to his house to take him for a joyride, and he had just gotten back from Hungary. And so I said, what have you been location scouting? He goes, can you keep a secret? I go, sure. He goes, well, I've already shot it. And at first I was like, oh man, geez. And he went on to explain to me that this was a prequel to the Munsters, how they basically came to America, and it's a love story about Herman and Lily and getting married and this and that. And it made sense to me that, obviously there wouldn't be an Eddie and there wouldn't be a Marilyn, because the original that he did, not the original, but his version of it leaves it at the end where there's definitely room for a sequel if he so chooses to do so.
Right.
So that was nice, and the fact that he's a friend and he allowed me to be the voice of the Tin Can Man who marries Herman and Lily. Nice, nice small piece, but a very very solid piece to do. So I enjoyed it, and when I saw the footage of it, when I went in to do my earlier this year, or last year I should say, when I went into do my voiceover and I saw it, I was immediately taken like, oh, this is going to be really good, because I saw the texture of how he was going with it. And it to be honest with you, it reminded me a lot of a Tim Burton type movie,
oh, yeah.
which which was cool. I go, oh, I see where he's going with this. And then lo and behold, Tim is over doing Wednesday. He's doing his deal, and Rob's doing the Munsters. I go, wow, this is like 58 years later. They're reliving this stuff again. This is like wild.
Oh, and believe me, I was praying that right before you said, I now pronounce you, I was going to take the helmet off and say, I now pronounce you.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, I wasn't in that at all.
Oh.
I only did a voiceover.
Darn. I was picturing you in it, Butch, but well.
Yeah, but I was happy to be part of it. Like I say, I saw it. I liked it. I think it was a great departure for him. I think he's a very talented guy. He happens to do monster movie genre, but he's capable of doing other things, and he proved it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got a sense of humor, folks. Don't be afraid.
He does. It was good. And I love Sherry Moon's version was spot on. Danny Roebuck's a good friend. Danny was great as the Count. So, Richard Brake and everybody in it was good.
Yeah, I agree. We had fun with it. Well, Butch, this has just been wonderful. I can't thank you enough for joining me. Like I said, I've been a fan, most of my life. And, it's great. You're one of the survivors. And it was a great era, as you said, but it was also perilous.
It's one of those perfect storms, a little 2-year show, a long, long, long time ago. But, when I watch it, and sometimes I'll watch it and I just look at it from a very interesting point of view, because I like to look at everybody else's, input other than mine. And whether it's the set design or whether it's George Barris's cars or the music or the Foley artists or just the writing, it's really a strong show. And I think that has a lot it was really a good, solid, entertaining show with a lot of quality and a lot of at various levels. There really isn't a weak link in it, especially some of the guest stars that you were lucky enough to have earlier.
Yes.
It was strong all the way across the board. And I think that's any show that can live that long has to have that strength in it of quality. I mean, it was unique and it was funny and it was campy, but it was also a quality show.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I'm hoping that you finally did give up that nasty habit of biting your nails. And
because I just did a thing where the guy wanted to do that joke and I did it again. Like, oh my gosh. And it's like the number one question whenever I go anywhere. What is it? Where's Woof Woof?
Right. And what were the nails made out of? And were you really eating them? And what?
It's wax. Everybody needs wax.
Oh, yummy. Flavored.
And if any of your listeners need to reach me or they want any Munster stuff, you can go to Munsters.com and all things Munster on the gram, and everything will be taken. You can find me through all kinds of social media, but go to Munsters.com and all things Munster. I'd appreciate it.
Yes, there is great stuff in the store there, folks. I highly recommend you take a look. You've got great merchandise, and how could you not? I mean, what a theme. It's fantastic.
The Munsters was a very heavily merchandised stuff. A lot of the stuff you see there isn't really mass-produced stuff. It's kind of like one-off stuff that is made as people order it, so that's nice too. And then there is some regular stuff that you can get at the store, but it is a good store. I appreciate that. And thank you all very much for listening, and thank you, Pat, for having me on.
Thank you, Butch, and take care.
Absolutely. You too, buddy.
There you have it, another Retro TV Radio episode in the books. Be sure to check out Butch's website, Munsters.com, to see all of his incredible content and Munsters merchandise. Also, be sure to become part of Butch's online community. Go to the official Munsters fan group on Facebook and on Instagram at All Things Munsters. I'd also like to thank our mutual friend and former podcast guest, Kathy Garver, for arranging this wonderful interview. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave me a positive review. You can also follow me on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at Golden Rage of TV and on Twitter at Golden Rage of TV1. I'm your host, Pat McCormick, and thanks for listening to Retro TV Radio.